The delicate balance that had once defined Finn and Lee's relationship was now teetering on the edge of collapse. The unspoken bond they had shared for years based on mutual respect, understanding, and shared dreams was unraveling at an alarming rate. It all began when Finn discovered the truth that had been hidden from him for so long, truth about Luna's condition. For months, Finn had trusted Lee, believing her to be the one person he could turn to, the one person who would never lie to him. But the shock he experienced upon learning that Lee had concealed Luna's life-altering secret left him reeling. It was a betrayal that he couldn't easily forgive. Luna, the woman who had caused so much upheaval in the Spencer family, had been hiding a devastating reality, and Lee had known about it all along. Finn had always considered Lee to be an ally, someone he could trust without question. But now, as he confronted her with the truth, his world was turned upside down. How could she have kept such an important piece of information from him? How could she have kept him in the dark about Luna's situation when it was clear that everything about their lives and their future was at stake? Finn's anger boiled over as he stood face to face with Lee, demanding answers. "Why didn't you tell me, Lee?" His voice cracked with frustration, and the pain in his eyes was undeniable. "Why would you keep this from me? I trusted you, and you lied to me." Lee, visibly shaken, tried to explain herself, but her words seemed hollow to Finn, a weak attempt to justify the betrayal. "Finn, I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying to protect you from the stress. Luna's situation is complicated, and I thought it was best to keep this from you until I had more information." But Finn, now consumed with anger, couldn't accept her excuse. It wasn't just about the Lino. It was about the violation of trust, the fact that Lee had kept him in the dark for so long. Luna's condition, which Finn had been kept unaware of, was a matter that had been central to their lives. It was a problem they could have faced together. And now Finn felt like he had been shut out of a pivotal moment in their lives. He couldn't understand why Lee would make such a decision. "I have a right to know, Lee." Finn's voice was sharp, and the hurt in his tone was palpable. "This is my life too. You didn't just hide this from me. You kept me from making an informed decision about the future. You've been manipulating the situation, and I don't know if I can trust you anymore." The words were out before he could stop them, and as soon as they left his mouth, Finn regretted them. He didn't want to hurt Lee. He never wanted to drive a wedge between them. But the feeling of betrayal was overwhelming, and the tension that had been building for months was now at a boiling point. Lee's eyes filled with tears, but her expression remained firm. "Finn, I never meant to betray you," she whispered, her voice strained. "I was trying to protect you, protect us. I thought if we kept this between us, we could figure it out together. I didn't want you to be burdened by Luna's complications. I didn't want you to have to choose between her and your family." Finn shook his head in disbelief. "You made that choice for me, Lee. You took away my ability to make that decision. You think you were protecting me, but you were only protecting yourself. I can't live with that. I can't live with someone who doesn't trust me enough to share the truth, especially when the stakes are this high." His heart was heavy with the weight of his words. Finn had spent so many years building a relationship with Lee, one that he had believed was built on honesty and mutual respect. Now, everything he had worked for seemed like a lie, a fragile illusion that had crumbled the moment he learned of her secret. Lee took a step back, her face pale as she processed the gravity of Finn's words. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was thick, filled with the weight of the hurt they both felt. Lee had never imagined that things would come to this point, that her decision to protect Finn would have this kind of fallout. She had never expected him to react this way, never thought that the trust they had would be so easily shattered. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Finn's anger was justified. She had acted out of fear, out of the desire to protect him, but in doing so, she had pushed him away in a way she never intended. Finn, too, was left grappling with his own emotions. He loved Lee, and he wanted to believe that she had acted in his best interest, but the betrayal fell too deep. It wasn't just about Luna anymore, it was about their entire relationship, the foundation that had once seemed so solid. now cracking beneath the weight of their lies and secrets. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," Finn admitted, his voice breaking. "You don't get to decide what's best for me. I should have been a part of this. I should have known. I can't keep living like this, wondering what else you're hiding from me." Lee's heart sank at his words, and she could feel the distance between them growing with each passing second. She had hoped that Finn would understand her reasons, that he would see the sacrifice she had made. But the pain in his eyes, the hurt in his voice, told her that the damage had been done. The trust between them had been fractured in a way that couldn't easily be repaired. "Finn, please," Lee pleaded, her voice trembling. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted us to be a family, to get through this together. Please, don't give up on me now." Finn stood there, his arms crossed, his heart heavy. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but a small part of him wanted to believe Lee. He wanted to believe that her intentions were pure, that she hadn't meant to betray him. But another part of him that had been burned by the truth was reluctant to let her off the hook so easily. The line between love and distrust had become blurry, and Finn wasn't sure which side he stood on anymore. "I don't know if I can just forget this, Lee," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if we can go back to the way things were. I need time." Lee nodded, her face full of sorrow. She had known this moment was coming, but the reality of it was crushing. The realization that the one person she had always trusted, the one person who had meant everything to her, now stood at a distance, unwilling to forgive her, was more painful than she had anticipated. As Finn walked away, leaving Lee standing alone, the weight of the moment hit both of them. They had both lost something invaluable: trust, love, and a shared future. In the days that followed, the silence between Finn and Lee grew deafening. Both of them tried to go about their lives, but everything had changed. Their relationship, once defined by their connection and shared dreams, now felt uncertain and broken. Finn, in his anger and hurt, threw himself into his work and other distractions, trying to avoid confronting the pain of what had happened. Lee, heartbroken and full of regret, found herself questioning everything. Had she made the right decision by keeping the truth from Finn? Could she ever rebuild the trust they had once shared? And was there any hope for their future together? The cracks in their relationship were clear, and both of them knew it. It was only a matter of time before they had to face the reality of what had transpired, whether they could rebuild the trust, heal the wounds, or walk away from each other forever. The once unshakable bond between them was now hanging by a thread, and neither knew whether it would survive the weight of their secrets. As the days passed, it became clear that the path ahead would not be an easy one. The road to reconciliation, if it existed at all, would be long and painful, and the outcome was far from certain. But for now, all Finn and Lee could do was wait and hope for a resolution that seemed ever more elusive with each passing day. The story between Luna, Will Spencer, and Bill Spencer became increasingly tangled with every passing day. The family dynamics that had once been fragile now seemed on the verge of unraveling completely. What started as a straightforward, though complicated, pregnancy had transformed into a minefield of secrets, lies, and betrayal. Luna's pregnancy was the focal point of this explosive tension. She had claimed, without a shadow of a doubt, that the child she was carrying was Will Spencer's, the result of their past relationship and the future they had imagined together. But the very foundation of this belief was shaken when the truth came crashing down. Will was not the father. The revelation that Luna had used a sperm donor to artificially inseminate herself was a devastating blow. Will, already deeply hurt by the deception, now found himself in an emotional tailspin. He had spent so long imagining this child as a symbol of his future with Luna, but the truth had forced him to reconsider everything. The grief was overwhelming, and yet there was no turning back. Now, Luna's claim that the child was Will's once again threw the family into chaos, and Bill Spencer, who had always been protective of Luna, found himself thrust into the middle of the conflict. Bill's relationship with Luna had always been complex, filled with both tension and affection. He had never fully embraced Will's role in Luna's life, but now, as the issue of paternity reared its ugly head, he was faced with a dilemma. Bill wanted nothing more than to protect Luna, to shield her from the pain and turmoil that had been caused by Will's past actions. But with Luna's insistence that the child was Will's, Bill's view of the situation began to shift. He became increasingly insistent that Luna should end the pregnancy, a decision he argued would protect them both from further emotional destruction. In Bill's eyes, the child, whether Will's or not, was an obstacle to their future, and he was unwilling to accept a future that involved the Spencer family's bitter legacy. Bill's emotions were raw, his need to control the situation mounting as he fought to shield Luna from the consequences of her own choices. But Luna's response to Bill's demand was one of defiance. She was resolute, claiming that the child, regardless of how it had been conceived, was hers to protect and raise. The tension between Bill and Luna escalated as their opposing views collided. Luna could not understand why Bill, a man who had always placed his family above all else, would now try to control her decision regarding the child she was carrying. She was adamant that this was her choice, that she would not be coerced into terminating the pregnancy. But Bill, blinded by his desire to control and protect Luna, pushed back harder. In his eyes, she was making a mistake, one that would inevitably lead to more pain for both of them. It was a standoff that left no room for compromise, a battle of wills that would define the course of their relationship from that moment on. As the situation between Luna and Bill grew more volatile, Will found himself caught in the crossfire. His emotional turmoil over Luna's deceitful pregnancy had already left him deeply hurt. And now the fight between Luna and Bill was creating even more distance between him and the people he once trusted. But Will was not someone who would back down in the face of a challenge. His anger and frustration were slowly turning into a plan for revenge, a plan that involved none other than Electra Forrest Earthwoman, who had long been a thorn in the side of the Spencer family. Electra had always carried an air of superiority, using her charm and status to manipulate those around her, especially within the Forrester family. Will, once content to ignore her games, now saw an opportunity to strike. He had always been aware of Electra's manipulative nature, but now, fueled by betrayal and resentment, he was ready to confront her in a way that would shake the very foundation of the Forrester empire. His intentions were clear: to hurt Electra as deeply as he had been hurt, to make her feel the weight of the Spencer family's anger and betrayal. Will's plan, however, was not without its complications. His obsession with getting back at Electra only served to further distance him from Luna, who was already feeling abandoned by the man she had once loved. Their relationship, already fractured by the paternity lie, was now under intense pressure. Luna, feeling trapped between Will's actions and Bill's demands, found herself at a breaking point. She needed support, but all she could see were two men who were locked in a battle over her life, her future, and her child. She wanted to make her own decisions, to have control over her body and her future, but she was being pulled into different directions by the very people who were supposed to care for her. Meanwhile, the war between Bill and Will reached new heights. Bill, desperate to protect Luna from the emotional devastation of Will's rejection, continued to pressure her to terminate the pregnancy. His frustration grew as he realized that his influence over Luna was waning and that the situation was spiraling out of control. He had always believed that he could control every situation, every relationship, but now he was facing a battle he could not win. Luna was determined to keep the child, and Bill's insistence on abortion only drove a deeper wedge between them. Will, on the other hand, found himself caught up in his pursuit of vengeance against Electra. He began to manipulate situations to turn the screws on her, taking advantage of her insecurities and using her own tactics against her. He knew exactly how to push her buttons, how to expose her weaknesses, and he was doing so with cold precision. His actions, however, were having unintended consequences. The more he pushed Electra, the more damage he did to his relationship with Luna. Luna, already overwhelmed by the pressure from Bill, now felt increasingly alienated by Will's quest for revenge. The tension between the three of them, Bill, Will, and Luna, was reaching a breaking point. It was a volatile mix of emotions, love, hatred, jealousy, and betrayal. Every word exchanged, every action taken, seemed to pull them further apart. Luna, caught in the middle, was pushed to make a choice that would affect the course of her life and the lives of those around her. The question of whether she would go through with the pregnancy, whether she would choose Will or Bill, loomed over her like a dark cloud. Would she continue to hold on to the dream of a life with Will, despite the pain and betrayal that had clouded their past, or would she side with Bill, whose determination to protect her had led to an increasingly toxic relationship? As the days wore on, the stakes grew higher and the conflicts more intense. Will's focus on revenge, Bill's obsession with controlling Luna's choices, and Luna's desperate desire to have a future with her child without interference were all pulling them in different directions. The family, once united by love and loyalty, was now on the brink of destruction, with each person fighting for something they could no longer define. And in the midst of it all, the child Luna carried, innocent and unaware of the battle raging around it, remained a symbol of the fractured future of the Spencer family. What had once been a symbol of hope for Will and Luna was now a point of contention that threatened to tear them all apart. Would Luna be able to navigate this turbulent time and make the right decision for herself and her child? Or would the conflict between Bill and Will ultimately determine the fate of her future? The fight was far from over, and no one could predict what the next chapter in this tangled story would hold.